He had already survived the battlefield, but it was love that almost killed him. When Eli Morgan, decorated Marine and wheelchair-bound hero, was pushed off a cliff by the woman he trusted most, his body broke again. But his soul didn't. Not because he was strong, but because someone refused to let go. His German shepherd Ghost stood over his broken body for 3 days until help came. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's about loyalty that never leaves, even when everyone else does. If you believe no hero should die forgotten, stay with us and let us know where you're watching from. Sometimes love wears fur and waits in silence. The ocean didn't roar. That evening, it whispered low, slow, like it knew what was coming. Below the craggy cliffs of Mendocino's rugged coastline, waves lapped at jagged rocks like a patient executioner waiting for the drop. Atop the bluff stood a house too pretty for the pain it held. Whitewashed siding, wraparound porch, floor-to-ceiling. Windows that looked out over the Pacific like eyes pretending not to cry. Inside, Eli Morgan sat in silence. The marine dress blues no longer fit. His body didn't either. Once broad-shouldered and upright, Eli now moved through life in a chair that squeaked when the weight shifted wrong. Spinal damage from the second IED blast had ended his deployments. The medals followed him home. So did the stares. So did the silence. So did Vanessa. She was everything the tabloids loved: tall, blonde, camera perfect. Her Instagram bio still said, Marine wife, sunshine soul. Her smile in public was polished. Her eyes in private were tired. She had stayed, technically, moved with him to this oceanside haven for healing. She played her part well. Until lately, Ghost knew before Eli did. The German shepherd had been a gift from Eli's unit, trained, bonded, loyal to the marrow. He was 5 now, smart beyond measure, alert to every muscle twitch, every scent change, every temperature drop in the room. And lately, Ghost had been unsettled. Eyes tracking Vanessa like she was a storm he couldn't hear yet but already felt. In his bones. That night, the air felt wrong. Vanessa stood in the doorway of the sunroom. Arms folded, hair still curled from the charity event she left early. Her eyes were unreadable. Let's go outside, she said softly. You said you wanted to feel the ocean breeze again. Eli hesitated. He didn't ask why her voice felt rehearsed. He didn't ask why Ghost had suddenly stood between them like a wall, blocking her steps. It's okay, boy, Eli whispered. Ghost didn't move. Vanessa knelt, patted his neck, and whispered something only the dog heard. Then she smiled at Eli again. I'll push you. She wheeled him slowly down the path toward the overlook. The wind picked up as they approached. The cliff's edge, Eli shivered. The sun was almost gone, dipping low like a wounded bird falling toward the sea. You okay? She asked, voice too sweet. Yeah, Eli murmured. It's peaceful out here. Vanessa stopped. It is, she said. Her hands still rested on the wheelchair's grips. The gravel path ended just 10 feet from the drop. The safety rail had rusted through in one corner. I used to come here when I was little, Vanessa said suddenly. Before I met you. Before all this. Eli frowned. What do you mean? Her grip tightened. I mean, back when life was full of possibilities, not burdens. The word hit like a bullet. Eli turned slightly. Vanessa, but she didn't let him finish. With one swift shove, she pushed. Eli didn't scream. The wind ripped his breath away before it could form. The world flipped, sky to rock, salt to scream. His body hit the rocks below with a sound no one heard, except Ghost. The dog howled from the porch. Above. Vanessa stood frozen for a moment, eyes wide, face blank. Then she turned, walked back up the path. Ghost lunged at her with a bark sharp enough to shake glass. But she raised a hand. You'll forget him, she whispered. Dogs always do. She turned back to the house and disappeared inside. Ghost didn't forget. He ran. Down the trail, into the brush. through the darkness. His paws found purchase on ledges no human could navigate. His nose led him to the blood, to the twisted wreckage of a man who had once carried him into fire. Eli wasn't dead, but he was broken again. Cold, bleeding, alone. Until Ghost curled beside him, nudged his face, and let out a low whine full of sorrow and defiance. And there, on the rocks below, a home filled with betrayal, loyalty refused to let go. The first thing Eli felt was the weight. Not pain, not fear, just the heavy stillness of a body that couldn't move. He didn't know how long it had been, seconds, minutes. Time doesn't behave the same when you're lying broken at the bottom of a cliff. The sky was just a pale bruise far above. His wheelchair lay crumpled in the rocks like a fallen crow. Blood crawled from his temple, slow and steady. His spine screamed. One leg was twisted unnaturally beneath him. He couldn't feel the other at all. His arms moved only when he forced them. Ribs flared, lungs struggled. But his heart, kept beating. And then he heard it. The sound of claws scraping stone. Ghost. The German shepherd's face appeared above him, wet with sea spray, eyes wild with urgency. His fur was slick with rain, chest heaving as he sniffed Eli from head to toe, circling like a medic trained in a past life. He licked the blood at Eli's brow, whimpered once, then pressed his body close against Eli's side. Warmth. Real, alive. Warmth. Eli couldn't speak, could barely move his lips. But he saw Ghost's eyes, and in them, a fierce refusal. I won't leave you. The rain came harder that night. Ghost didn't care. He lay over Eli's chest like a weighted blanket, shielding him from the wind. When cold waves reached the rocks below, he growled at them. When the sky cracked with thunder, he didn't flinch. When hunger came, he left only to dig through discarded wrappers at the edge of a forgotten campsite, up the bluff returning with a crust of bread, a smashed protein bar, dropped at Eli's side like offerings. Eli drifted in and out of consciousness, hovering somewhere between the edge of life and the memory of what used to be. Faces swirled in his mind. Vanessa, laughing on their wedding day. The boys from his unit, carrying Rocco's body home. The therapist who told him, you have to want to survive, Eli. He had wanted. He had tried. And now all that remained was this dog, this weight, this warmth. On the second night, Eli started shivering violently. His breaths shortened. His skin turned waxen. Ghost moved faster, darting off into the fog to scout for help, then returning minutes later, pressing harder into Eli's side. At one point, he sat beside him and barked sharp, repetitive, calling not just for help, but for hope. Nothing answered. No footsteps. No lights. Just the endless drone of waves and the cold hush of apathy. But Ghost didn't stop. He barked again the next morning. And again, until someone finally heard. It was a hiker. A young man from Portland who'd taken a detour off the main trail, earbuds in, unaware of anything but his podcast, until Ghost burst from the brush, barking madly, running back and forth, circling like a signal flare with fur. The hiker followed, reluctantly at first, then urgently. When he reached the cliff's edge and saw the broken man lying in the rocks, his scream cracked the air. Calls were made. Sirens wailed. Hours later, a Coast Guard chopper hovered above the bluff, rotor wash spraying sand like shrapnel. Medics rappelled down. Ghost stood over Eli, snarling at first, refusing to let them near, until Eli, barely conscious, managed a whisper, "It's okay, Ghost, let them." Only then did the dog step back, watching every move like a guardian. When they lifted Eli into the gurney, Ghost followed. When they zipped the transport up, he pawed at the canvas. When they tried to close the helicopter's hatch without him, he leapt inside before they could stop him. And something about that defiance made them pause. The medic looked at the pilot. "Leave him." The pilot nodded. He earned his seat. As the chopper rose, Eli's pulse faded into monitors, machines, and morphine. But Ghost never looked away. He watched the ocean disappear beneath them, watched the cliffs shrink into memory, watched the betrayal stay behind. While loyalty flew toward hope, the silence finally broke. And Ghost was the reason. Hospitals don't sound like hope. They hum. They beep. They hiss behind closed doors and fluorescent lights. They carry the stink of sterilized regret and coffee. Gone cold. But for Eli Morgan, lying still in room 412 of St. Helena Memorial, the only sound that mattered was breathing, not his ghosts. The German Shepherd hadn't moved from the corner since the helicopter landed 2 nights ago. Curled into himself like a watchful shadow, Ghost didn't eat, didn't sleep. Every time a nurse entered, he rose, silent and tense, standing between Eli's bed and the stranger like a wall with teeth. "He won't let us near him," one nurse whispered. "He thinks he's still on the battlefield." Another said that the hospital tried to remove him, twice, both times. Ghost growled low, never snapping, never lunging, but with a warning that stopped hands mid-air. On the 3rd attempt, the charge nurse looked at the charts, the story, the scar down Eli's back, and shook her head. Let him stay. And so he did. Every second, Eli lay unconscious for 4 days. The damage was severe internal bleeding. Shattered ribs, a spinal fracture dangerously close to severing what little nerve function he still had. But doctors whispered that what kept him tethered wasn't medicine. It was him. Ghost. Every time Eli's pulse dipped, Ghost lifted his head and let out a soft whine, like he could sense the breath fading. And every time he laid his head back down, the monitors steadied. Visitors came. Police. Reporters. Hospital administrators with legal forms and guarded voices. No one knew how a man in a wheelchair ended up at the base of a cliff with no witnesses. And Vanessa? She had vanished for now, but Ghost didn't care about that. He wasn't watching the door for detectives or answers. He was watching Eli. On the 5th day, the body on the bed stirred. Just a twitch at first, then fingers shifting beneath a blanket. A groan. Eyes cracking open to the glare of morning and machines. And then, Ghost moved. He stood, pressed his head gently against Eli's arm. Eli turned his head with agonizing slowness. His eyes were fogged with drugs, pain, confusion. But they cleared. The second he saw that face, Ghost. The word was barely breath, but it was enough. Ghost wagged his tail once. Just once. Eli's throat worked like it hadn't in years. He reached up with trembling fingers and touched the dog's head. "You stayed." Tears burned his eyes. He didn't stop them. A nurse peeked in, saw the scene, and silently backed away. In the hours that followed, doctors updated him in gentle voices. Crushed vertebrae, lacerated spleen, broken scapula. And yet, no head trauma, no brain damage. A miracle, they said. Eli just blinked at them. He didn't call it a miracle. He called it Ghost. 2 days later, the police returned. They brought questions. Eli had few answers. "I don't remember the fall," he said truthfully. "I remember the wind." Her hands on the chair. Then, nothing. "She?" the officer asked. "Vanessa," he said. And even her name felt like poison on his tongue. They asked more. He gave little. But Ghost watched them all. One day, a social worker brought in a therapist with a gentle smile and questions about trauma. Ghost growled. The therapist chuckled nervously and offered him a biscuit. Ghost took it, then laid his head in Eli's lap. Eli managed a laugh for the first time since the fall. "Looks like he's doing more therapy than you." The therapist smiled. "That's usually how it goes with dogs like him." That night, alone in the dim glow of muted TV static, Eli whispered to the dog sleeping by his bed, "I wouldn't have made it without you." Ghost didn't move, didn't need to. That night, Eli dreamed not of the fall, not of Vanessa, not of pain. He dreamed of running through tall grass again. Boots on solid ground. A shepherd at his side. Wind in his face. And peace. When he woke, Ghost was there. Still there, always there. The news hit the airwaves before Eli could even sit upright in bed. Marine veteran missing wife breaks down during interview. It was playing on the small TV bolted to the corner of his hospital room. Eli watched in stunned silence as the screen showed a familiar face, Vanessa, sitting perfectly poised on a leather couch in what looked like a luxury studio. Tears streaked her mascara just enough to be camera-worthy. Her voice trembled as she spoke into the microphone. I don't know what happened. He just disappeared. I went to make tea, and when I came back, he was gone. Wheelchair and all. Eli's mouth tightened into a grim, pale line. Ghost sat at his feet, eyes fixed on the screen. His ears twitched once, then flattened. He growled low, not loud, but deep, the kind of growl that didn't come from anger. It came from memory. She's lying, Eli muttered, still weak but steady. The nurse standing nearby froze. Eli looked up at her. I didn't disappear. She wheeled me out there to the cliff. And his voice caught. The nurse set the clipboard down. You don't have to say it all right now. But Eli didn't stop. She pushed me. She thought no one would find me, but he did. He looked down at Ghost. He found me. He kept me alive. That was the first time the word attempted murder was written in his chart. It wouldn't be the last. An hour later, the hospital administrator called in a sheriff's deputy. They took a formal statement. Eli recounted everything he remembered. The feel of the wheelchair, the way her hands trembled before the shove, the last look in her eyes. It was betrayal, not rage. Calculated. Cold. The deputy nodded, lips tight. We're going to need evidence. Ghost barked once and trotted to the side table, nudging the battered backpack a paramedic had brought in from the rescue. The officer raised an eyebrow as Eli pulled out a cracked GoPro case. What's that? Eli smiled faintly. Something the hiker left behind. He said he saw Ghost barking on the cliff. Dropped this when he ran for help. Didn't think it recorded anything. They plugged it into the hospital's tablet. The footage was shaky trees, fog, boots. But then, clearly, a glimpse of the house on the bluff. A faint figure pushing something across the overlook. Frame by frame, you could see it. A wheelchair. A woman. A shove. The deputy's face changed. This'll get us a warrant. 2 days later, Vanessa was arrested at a brunch party in downtown Los Angeles. She wore designer heels and a wide-brimmed hat. Photos of her crying were plastered across headlines by sundown. Social media exploded. Marine's wife betrays hero husband. Public sympathy swung like a pendulum. Eli watched it unfold from the quiet of his hospital room. He didn't feel victorious. He felt numb. Ghost never left his side. When a reporter tried to sneak into the ward for a statement, the dog met her at the door with a look that ended the conversation before it began. One nurse chuckled. He's your bodyguard, isn't he? No, Eli said. He's more than that. That night, the hospital allowed Ghost to sleep in Eli's bed for the first time. They didn't usually permit it. But rules bend when you owe a man your life. Eli lay in silence, hand resting gently on Ghost's back, eyes on the ceiling. Gonna walk again, he whispered. Even if it's just a few steps, not for her, not for the court, for you, for what you did. Ghost made no sound, but his tail thumped once against the blanket. In the morning, a physical therapist arrived. A new schedule was drawn. A new plan was made. Outside, the reporters still waited. The story had gone viral. But inside room 412, there was only one story that mattered. A man who fell, a dog who stayed, and a bond that the ocean couldn't wash away. The courtroom was too bright. Eli squinted beneath the harsh fluorescent lights as officers wheeled him inside. His hands trembled on the armrests, not from weakness, from memory. From the ghost of Vanessa's fingertips against the handles of his chair, the last time she'd touched him without a camera watching. Ghost padded silently at his side, matching the pace of the wheelchair. In the back row, reporters shifted. In their seats, laptops glowed. Microphones lined the edge of the press table like hungry vultures. But none of that mattered. She was here. Vanessa, still polished, still poised. Her blonde hair tied in a tight bun, lips lined, heels precise. Her orange prison jumpsuit didn't dull the carefully trained charisma in her face. She even managed a strained smile as he entered, like it might still work. Like she could charm her way out of the cliff. Eli didn't blink. The judge called the hearing to order an arraignment, not a trial. Just the beginning. But for Eli, it felt like the end of the long, slow fall. The prosecutor laid out the charges in a steady voice. Attempted murder, obstruction, false reporting. Vanessa pled not guilty. Gasps rippled across the gallery. The prosecutor played the GoPro footage again, this time in higher definition. The courtroom watched frame by frame as Vanessa pushed her husband toward the cliff's edge. No screams, no hesitation. Just the soft, terrifying calculation of someone who had decided love was less valuable than freedom. Ghost growled low beside Eli. The judge looked up. "Control your dog. He's just reacting to the truth," Eli replied, voice steady. "Same as all of us." The court recessed after 15 minutes. Vanessa's bail was denied, but that wasn't what made Eli exhale. It was Ghost, licking his knuckles as the guards led her away. "It's over," the gesture seemed to say. "She doesn't get to hurt you again." And for the first time in months, Eli believed it. Back at the hospital, the vibe had shifted. Doctors now spoke to him like a man, not a patient. They updated him on nerve regeneration therapy. "You might never walk again," they told him gently. "But with focus you might stand. Maybe move with assistance." Eli just nodded. Then, "We train." Ghost's ears perked. "You ready to work again?" Eli asked the shepherd. Ghost tilted his head, then pawed at Eli's lap, as if saying, "Was I ever off duty?" They began with parallel bars. Eli's arms strained. His hands shook. The first time he stood for 3 seconds, a nurse wept quietly behind her clipboard. The second time, Ghost stood directly in front of him, tail still, body frozen like a living brace. On the 4th day, Eli took a step, just one, then collapsed. But when he hit the mat, Ghost was there, nudging under his shoulder, catching more than just his body. The next morning, someone left a newspaper on Eli's tray. "Hero dog saves paralyzed Marine, loyalty that outlived betrayal." A photo showed Ghost lying on the hospital bed, Eli's hand in his fur. The caption called Ghost a national hero. Comments flooded in. Offers from animal charities. A Hollywood producer emailed a nurse, asking for film rights. Eli chuckled bitterly. "They never showed up when I was begging for help 2 years ago." Ghost simply yawned and curled back at his feet. That night, while nurses changed his bandages, Eli stared out the window at the sea beyond the hills. The same sea he'd almost died beside. The same one that had taken Rocco years before in Afghanistan. He thought of all the battles he'd fought on foreign soil, in foreign tongues, and realized the hardest one had happened right here, in his own home, without a single bullet. He didn't need revenge. He needed freedom. And he was finally moving toward it. One slow, brutal, beautiful step at a time. And Ghost would be there for every single one. The courtroom was packed this time. Not just reporters, not just lawyers, not just law students scribbling down their first brush with real human cruelty. There were veterans in uniform, dog handlers from K9 units, children holding homemade signs that read, "Thank you, Ghost." The overflow room had its own TV screen and folding chairs, and at the center of it all, flanked by federal marshals and spotlighted by truth, sat Eli Morgan, clean-shaven, eyes clear, still in his wheelchair, but different, taller, somehow, firmer. He wore a charcoal button-up shirt and navy slacks. His spine didn't sag. His jaw didn't tremble. His wounds hadn't vanished. He just stopped letting them speak louder than he could. Ghost sat to his left, calm but alert, wearing a dark service vest with 2 words printed across the chest. Loyalty lives. The trial had moved quickly, once. The GoPro footage had been authenticated. Vanessa's defense crumbled like driftwood under a tide. Her claims of confusion, of mental instability, of just helping him get closer to the view, all fell apart under the weight of precision. She wasn't frantic in that video. She was focused. She didn't act out of impulse. She made a decision. The prosecution emphasized that. Again and again. The defense tried one last move, a plea deal. 5 years, psychiatric evaluation, parole in 2. Eli declined. "I'm not angry," he told the judge. "I just want to make sure the next person she decides is too broken doesn't end up at the bottom of a cliff." When the guilty verdict came in, the court was silent. Even Vanessa seemed stunned, like the truth had never occurred to her as something with weight. The judge sentenced her to 18 years, without parole. Not for the push. But for the coldness in it, for the silence that followed. Outside the courthouse, Eli sat in front of a sea of microphones. Ghost stood beside him, tail still, eyes on the crowd. "I didn't survive because of luck," Eli said quietly. "I didn't survive because of the system. I survived because of a dog. Because while the woman I loved walked away, he came looking. And when he found me, he never left." He paused. Not for drama. For breath. "I think loyalty like that deserves more than a headline. It deserves a future." That clip went viral overnight. The next morning, the White House sent a letter of recognition. Ghost was named an honorary service companion of valor. The medal didn't mean much to the dog, but it meant everything to the country watching. Eli got letters from people he'd never met. "Your story reminded me to get out of bed again. My brother died last year. Your dog looks just like his. I left an abusive marriage after watching what you went through." Healing had found an echo, but not just for the world, for Eli too. His therapy sessions grew longer. He added a second parallel bar, then a treadmill harness. His upper body burned, ached, screamed. He loved it. Ghost adapted to nudging tennis balls toward patients in the trauma wing, hurling beside kids who wouldn't speak to anyone else. One of the therapists said, "He's got a sixth sense." Eli smiled. "No, he's just seen too much." That fall, Eli bought a small plot of land near Napa Valley, 6 acres, old barn, broken fencing, but plenty of room. He didn't want a mansion. He wanted a place with wind and soil and freedom. He named it Cliffside Haven, not to remember the fall, but the climb. Backup. Ghost was with him when he signed the deed. Sat at his feet when the first rescue dog arrived. Barked with joy when the second limped off the trailer. They were building something now. Not just a shelter, a sanctuary, for dogs that had been betrayed, for humans that had been abandoned, for souls that had been told, "You're too much trouble." They weren't. Not here. And not anymore. Because here, truth had teeth, and loyalty had a name. Ghost. The sun rose slower in the valley. It filtered through the mist that rolled gently across the hills, warming the dew on the old barn's roof before it ever touched the porch. That porch, once covered in peeling paint and rusted nails, had been rebuilt plank by plank by a man who used to think he had nothing left. Eli Morgan sat at the top of the ramp, cup of black coffee in his hand, Ghost lying at his feet. The dog didn't sleep anymore, not fully. He always had one ear tuned to the wind, one eye on the door. But here, he was softer. The old ranch house had become more than a home. It was a haven, just like Eli dreamed. The name carved into a weather-worn cedar sign out front, Cliffside Haven, for the left. Ito Shandy. There were now 6 dogs at the ranch, all rescues. Each with scars, each with stories. A shepherd with burn marks down her flank. A Labrador missing a paw. a half-blind hound that had been tied to a tree for 3 winters straight. None of them barked at Ghost. They knew who led the pack, and they knew who had once been saved. Eli had traded the therapy room for the barn workshop. Not because he'd given up on walking, but because he'd found something better than pushing his body for steps that came in pain. He was moving forward, even in a chair. The VA sent counselors sometimes, young guys with tight smiles and clipboards, who asked if he still had nightmares. He didn't lie, sometimes, but now the dreams were different, no longer about falling. Now they were about building. A knock came at the door just before 10 Eli rolled to the entry and opened it. Young man stood there, early 20s, army t-shirt faded to gray. His hands shook even as he tried to hide them in his pockets. "You the guy from the video?" he asked, voice graveled with shame. "Depends which one," Eli said with a half-smile. "The one with the dog." "The one who got pushed and still came back," Eli nodded. "Come in." The vet Jake had tried group therapy, medication. Nightmares wouldn't stop. He didn't trust people anymore. Didn't even trust himself. But then he watched Ghost. On the news, he just stayed, Jake had said, wiping at his eyes. No one stays like that. Eli offered him a job on the spot. Within weeks, Jake had a new bunk in the repurposed barn dorms. Within months, he was helping build the second dog run. By spring, there were 3 more volunteers. And 12 dogs. Eli found himself surrounded by people who didn't need fixing. They just needed room to breathe. To sit beside something that didn't flinch when they cried. To walk slowly through fields where no one judged the limp in their step. Ghost walked those fields every day. He'd slowed a little now. His muzzle had started to gray at the edges. But his eyes, still that deep, unshakable gold. That gaze that said, "I see what you don't say, I'm still here." Eli began writing again. He called it a journal, but it read more like scripture for the soul wounded. Stories of loyalty, of pain, of survival. He left copies in the front office for visitors. A woman from Boston read one and donated $10,000. A teenager from Tennessee sent a letter saying she wanted to work with dogs like Ghost one day. Eli sat on the porch one morning, holding that letter and shaking hands, Ghost beside him, the wind just beginning to lift. This matters, doesn't it?" he whispered. Ghost looked up, blinked slow, then nudged the letter with his nose. Yes, they'd come so far from that cliff. They'd gone from almost nothing to this. A haven born not in spite of the fall, but because of it. Not many would have survived. Even fewer would have turned it into a reason to heal others. But Eli had one advantage no one could calculate. A dog who never left. A loyalty that rebuilt what the world tried to burn. The grass swayed gently in the golden light of evening. Rows of folding chairs lined the clearing behind the barn, each one filled with faces wearing the same expression. Quiet reverence. Veterans, dog handlers, first responders, foster families, even teenagers from nearby high schools who had volunteered through the summer. Some had come with fresh uniforms. Others came with old scars. They were all here for one reason. Ghost. At the center of the field stood a new memorial, a carved granite stone, black as river slate, flanked by 2 iron dog statues. The engraving read, "For the one who stayed." Below that, GHOST service dog, savior, soul. Eli wheeled himself slowly to the front, the weight of the moment pressing into his chest like the battlefield gear he hadn't worn in years. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone, but his voice was steady. Some dogs follow, some protect, some lead. He looked toward the small pine box beside the stone. It held Ghost's ashes, but not his presence. That still lingered in the rustle of the trees, in the soft panting of the dogs lying at the crowd's feet, in the sunlight streaking through the oaks like it had chosen this hour just to remember him. But only one saved me from the edge twice. Once from a cliff, once from disappearing inside myself. The crowd didn't move. Eli continued. Ghost didn't live for medals. He didn't care about the articles or the camera crews or the invitations to Capitol Hill. He only cared that I kept breathing. He only cared that I didn't give up. He paused, then smiled faintly. He didn't let me. A soft breeze passed through the field. One of the other dogs, Rue, a once abandoned bloodhound, let out a single bark, as if saluting. Eli stood 6 handlers, graduates of the Haven's new canine companion program. Each one had been through darkness. Each had found light in the eyes of a dog, and now they would carry it forward. I started this place because of a fall, Eli said, glancing toward the distant hills. But we're not about falling anymore. We're about staying with those who are left behind. Staying when it's hard. Staying when it hurts. He looked at the stone again. We make a new oath today. One that doesn't wear a uniform or require a flag. One that says, if you're hurting, if you're broken, if you think you're too much trouble, we stay. Because Ghost did. A soft tear slid down his cheek, but he didn't wipe it away. The audience rose to their feet in silence. Eli rolled back as the handlers stepped forward, each one placing their hand on the granite stone. Behind them, their dogs sat patiently, wearing matching vests that read, the Ghost Legion. This wasn't just a service dog program. This was a movement. One born in betrayal, raised in survival, and lit by a fire that never left the eyes of a shepherd who chose to love louder than death. Later that evening, the lights dimmed around the property. Eli sat alone on the porch, a blanket over his lap, watching the stars bloom across the sky. I wish you could see them, he whispered. You'd have liked tonight. He placed his hand on the vest folded beside him, the one Ghost had worn in his final days. Paw print was embroidered on the chest. Below it, still here, somewhere in the night, a dog barked in the distance, not in fear, in honor, and Eli smiled, because even though Ghost was gone, he wasn't gone at all.